Okay, so let's take a concept of set timeout and set interval. These are some methods provided by JavaScript ecosystem where we can use a sort of timer to delay the execution of some function or some event. So for example, let's start with this set timeout. This set timeout is having this sort of syntax where there is a function called set timeout, and there is first argument which is a function and second argument is a number. Okay, so I will write it more clearly here. So set timeout, this function is there. Okay, and this function and you can create a function. So let's say function my function whatever, and you simply, let's say, print hello world, right? Then what happens is the syntax is something like this, that you pass this function. That is the first thing. Second thing you do is that you pass another second argument, which is, you can see that ms number, so millisecond number. So basically you can, if you want to delay the execution of this function by 1 second, then you have to pass 1000. If you want this to be run after 2 seconds, then you pass 2000. 1.5 seconds, then pass 1500, something like this. Okay, now if you run this code, then you will see that what will happen. Let's see something like this. So let's say a dot dot you have printed. For more clarity, let's write something like this, a and b. What you will see that when you run this thing, a will be immediately called, b will be immediately called after that, but this thing will call after 1.5 seconds this function. Okay, so if you run this, you'll see that a b, after 1.5 second hello world is printed. So a is printed, b is printed. After 1.5 second, this function is executed printing hello world. Okay, that is one thing. Second thing is that you can have this any small number. So let's say 500 millisecond, and then quickly it will be printed like half a second only. What do you think will happen if I make this 0? So a, and then will 0 means like sort of immediate, right? I don't want to have any delay. Do you think that after a hello world will be printed or not? It turns out that no. Even if it will be printed immediately, but the order will be something like this. See, immediately everything is printed, but the order is a, b, and then hello world. Why is that? So basically you have to understand a concept of something called event loop. So what happens is that whenever you add some function to be executed, that is scheduled to be executed in the next event cycle. Next event cycle means that when this whole thing is executed, then its turn comes to execute. So even if you said 0, that does not mean that immediately right now 0. It means that 0 delay after the whole thing is done. Okay, which means that I don't want any delay, but it will be executed in the next loop, right? Next event loop. And that's why the output is something. Actually, this thing is important because sometimes in interviews they will have something like this, some console log here, some console log here, and they will ask you that what will be the order of output. Okay, you have to understand that all these set timeout, and later we'll see another method called set interval. These things schedule your execution to the next event loop cycle. Okay, so that is fine. Second thing is that you can have this any function, it doesn't matter, right? And this will also work fine. Third thing is that now I know that this thing is like I'm just assigning a variable. Then why don't I directly declare it here only rather than creating a variable? No need of creating a variable, directly write it here only, right? So initially what I was writing here, that was this thing only. It looked complicated, but now you understand this first before comma, this whole thing is first argument. It is like anonymous function. Rather than creating it another variable, I am just creating it here only, right? And then second argument is whatever you want to put. Let's say 1000 you are putting, then after 1 second you want to execute this. Okay, that is the meaning. So what will happen after 1 second, this hello will print. That is the output of this thing. Next, there are arguments. There are arguments which you can pass to this callback function. So this callback function, which means that this function which we were having, this is also a function, right? So it can also have arguments, right? So let's say a b something you write, and you then what is this a b? You can let's write only hello. So hello a b, right? What will do you think it will be? It is undefined. Okay, so nothing is passed, but no, I want to pass something. Let's say I want to compute some logic here, and I want to pass some data to this function. What is the way to pass it? I want to execute some function after 1 second, but I also want to pass some data here. The thing is that in set timeout, the first argument is this thing, the second argument is this millisecond number. After that, whatever you pass, so let's say you pass 50, 70, whatever you keep on passing, those things are passed as arguments. So if you pass only 50, let's say, then a will be assigned 50 and b will be still undefined, because you are using 2 and again, like that, like a function, you defined a function with 2 arguments, but you passed only one value. But 50, 70, then you can see that both will be used. And again, 50, 70, 90, let's say 3 values you passed in, but you used only 2 variables, so again there are only 2 variables will be used, right? Or you can capture it, right? You can have a rest operation, or args, any name you can give, args, and this args will now be an array. And now it doesn't matter how many values you have, all the values from here onwards, all the values which are passed to this, they will be captured as arguments, right? They will be captured as arguments, and they will be available as an array. You can see that the whole thing is an array, right? So if you now how many arguments is passed, you don't need to hard code. Simply inside the function you can see what is the length, right? And you can clearly see that how many arguments are passed and how I need to operate on that. Okay, so that is just one thing, that whatever things you want to pass, you can pass it after the third argument, from the third argument. Okay, and that will be available inside this. Okay, let's see a concept of clear timeout. What if I started some timeout that, yeah, you know what, after 3 seconds I have to execute this. So for simplicity, let's remove arguments. Let's say we don't need it right now, just we need to print hello after 3 seconds. Okay, but you know what, after 2 seconds, I change my mind that no, actually the reason, see, I am printing simply hello world, right? Here you can do n number of complicated logics. You can fire up ajax calls, some api calls, and some, you are waiting for some data, but let's say from some other resource you already got the data, and then you decided that I scheduled it to run after 3 seconds, but you know what, my work is done, that thing is no more needed. And now you need to somehow like stop that, like at 2 seconds you are aware that I don't need to fire that. So how do you stop it from executing? For that, there is something called clear timeout. You can tell, so basically this set timeout thing, this whole thing will return you a value. Let's print out that value. So const xx is equal to, and let's print that xx. So this is basically called timeout id. So let's properly name it, timeout id. Okay, what is the timeout id? Some number, just some number, it is there. Okay, so you can see that internally it tracks care of that, where what is the time, which it is going to be triggered, how much is the scheduled amount you did, and how to, when to execute that. So all these things are internally taken care by that thing. This timeout id, actually you can pass to something other, which is called clear timeout. This is set timeout, there is something called clear timeout. Okay, so if you take this and you pass to clear timeout, this thing. Okay, then if you don't do this, then obviously it will be executed after this. So it is waiting, means it will be executed. But if you do this, then you see it is gone. Now it is not, no more waiting, means yeah, it will not no more be executed. But yeah, here what happened, I scheduled it and I immediately cancelled it, right? But what if I want to clear it, but let's say after some time, after some time, then basically you can write this again in some other set timeout. Okay, understood? So let's say you are writing some set timeout, and in that after 2 seconds you are saying that I will clear this, something like this. Okay, so you can see A be printed if it waited for 2 seconds. So you can clearly see here, if you want to stopping, let's say. So after 2 seconds I am stopping. After 2 seconds I'm stopping, right? And yeah, and that's why it did not execute, right? But if it is, let's say, 5, then before it could stop, that is already triggered, right? So before it could stop, that will be gone. So you can see that this hello is already executed, right? So this is the way in which you can and I just for simplicity I wrote it in timeout. Actually you will get some let's say asynchronous data from somewhere else, and then you can decide that when you want to stop it or not stop it. But the idea is that whenever this thing is called, if this thing is called before triggering, then it will no more trigger. If it has already triggered, if it has already been executed, then after that, even if you call it, it doesn't matter, right? It has already been executed. Okay, so that is clear timeout. So you get some ID and you simply pass that ID to this clear timeout. Okay. Set interval. So we saw set timeout. There is something called set interval. So like it is like set timeout. The difference is that set timeout runs once after, let's say here you wrote 1000. So it runs once after 1 second. Set interval runs every 1 second. Okay. So set timeout, we saw one time it ran and then it is done, right? It is done. But if you, instead of this, you have, let's say let's remove this, it is not needed now, and instead of set timeout you have, let's say, set interval. Okay, and what is going to happen is that the same thing, the same function is going to run, but this time it will run every 1 second, every clock tick. See, hello, hello, hello. So basically what is happening is that it will keep on running infinitely till you stop it. How do you stop it? So it will keep on running every 1 second, right? Until you stop it. And again, second thing is that, and you can control C to cancel it. The second thing is that here also you can pass like whatever I want to pass, foo and 99, right? These are the two values I want to print. Okay, so my X is foo and A is 99. Okay, and you can print that, my X, my A. And again that is fine. Okay, so this thing is printed, but it will keep on doing this. I want to stop this after some time. Okay, so here you can see that the arguments you can pass and that will be available. But if you want to stop it, like set timeout, here also there is something called clear interval. So set timeout had clear timeout, set interval has clear interval. And ClearInterval does exactly the same thing. That it when you return some id, so right now I will cancel it. So let's say const interval id. Okay, so let's say interval id. This interval id you can pass to not clear timeout but rather clear interval, and as soon as you pass, it will no more be executed. So right now it is like immediately called, right? So even 1 second it did not got time to execute. But again, let's say uh, 5 second, I wait for 5 seconds, right? Then let's say I do some set timeout, right? In that set timeout I'm saying that I will run this but after 5 seconds. I will run this, I will clear this, but after 5 seconds. What will that mean? That will mean that hello XA will run 3 times, 4 times, and fifth time before the fifth time could complete. So actually, you can understand that if you make it slightly more, so let's say 5100. Okay, so what is happening is that, see, at so it started from 0. At 0 there is no printing, right? At 1000 millisecond the first print happened. Here the first print happened, right? So here the first print happened. Similarly, at 2000 second mark and 2000 millisecond mark, the second print happened, right? Second print happened. So now you understand that exactly at 500 millisecond mark the fifth print happened, and exactly at 500 millisecond you are clearing that also. So there can be a race condition, right? Whether this got printed first or this got printed or this got cancelled first, right? So if you give slightly more time, then you can see that 3 times, 4 times, fifth time, 5 times it printed, and then we got this. However, if you definitely don't want to run it 5 times, then you can simply give it like 4500 millisecond or something. Then it will definitely run only 4 times, right? So the idea is that you have the control that when to cancel it, but it is important to know this about set interval, because set timeout is like obvious, so it will run just once, so that should not be a big deal. Here if you don't stop it, it will keep on running indefinitely, right? And if it is running somewhere silently in your code, then it is hogging up your memory also, right? Or CPU of it depends on what you are doing inside that, right? So it is very important to clean up these things as soon as possible, and as soon as you are aware of. Okay, so yeah, that should be it. For now. These are slightly handy utilities which we will use later. So right now we just discussed so that later we can use it comfortably without thinking that this syntax we have not discussed. Okay, so we will use this after within when we will discuss promises or something. We will definitely use these sort of syntaxes there. Okay, so that will be all for this video. See you in the next one.